Hello, we're going to talk about curtains. These curtains here are supposed to be blackout curtains, that's what they said when I bought them. But the light that comes through them is a bit much. Whether we're trying to fool children into sleeping or you've got a job that means you work unusual hours, our body clocks are set to follow daylight, and blackout curtains can be the difference between sleep and none. I particularly don't want to wake up at 5 in the morning when my child says, "The sun's awake, so I'm awake." So, today I'm going to talk about how to turn curtains like these, which are standard shop bought curtains, into more of a blackout curtain. Now you can see they're very standard eyelet curtains, and I'm going to try and put some blackout lining on the inside to make them that little bit darker so that the light doesn't come through and I get a better night's sleep. Right, here is what we're going to need. Some good scissors that will cut fabric, a picker, don't cut yourself, some pins. I like the glass headed ones that are easier to hold on to and you can see them if you drop them on the floor, a tape measure. And I've also got this big roll of blackout curtain lining. This was bargain, it was about £4.99 a metre, and I bought loads because I've got a couple of jobs to do. So I've laid out the curtain on the floor. It's really important to use your floor space. Curtains are massive, and if you can't find the space to lay it out, and it can be anywhere. I mean, I'm sandwiched between a bed and a wardrobe and a toilet. Anywhere that's big enough to lay the curtain out is good. And what I've done, I've got my blackout lining and I have cut it to the width of my curtain. You see it's very slightly wider than my curtain when everything doesn't wrinkle up. And I know that it's longer than my curtain. So what I did is I measured from where I want the fabric to start to the bottom. I took off a little bit for so it doesn't overhang the hem, and I added a bit for a seam allowance at the top, and I folded up and pinned 10 centimetres all the way along because that's what I worked it out as, so that I could make a hem. And then I'm going to straight stitch along here with whatever colour I've got to hand. You will see it because it's on the inside, but because my 4-year-old has picked these beautiful pink shiny curtains that will teach me to take a 4-year-old to a shop, I'm going to go for pink thread so that it matches the curtains. And I'll come back once I've sewn the hem. Hello. So I've stitched all the way along in a fetching pink. So I've got my turn up here all the way, and I've gone backwards and forwards slightly at each end. Now on this lining fabric you can see, and I don't know how well this will show up, there's a side that looks like cotton and a side that's kind of smooth and a bit plastic. Now I think that the smooth side needs to go inside and the cotton side needs to come on the outside so that you see it, because then it looks a bit more like fabric. So what I've done is I've got the cotton side outwards, I've got my crease and my hem, and I've got my curtain underneath, and now I'm going to do right sides together, and I'm going to line up all the way along my lining fabric and pin it, because the aim is to stitch along here and then fold it down to start the inside of my curtain. So I am going to pin all the way along, and I'm going to unpick this seam here so that I can put the lining underneath this edge seam, and I'll come back to you when I've started pinning it. So here I am, and now I've managed to pin all of the lining fabric along the top of the curtain. So I'll show you how I've pinned it on. You can see here's the eyelets, and everywhere I've got a consistent about 1 centimetre of fabric overhanging the shiny fabric underneath, and it goes right so that what will happen is this will tuck and the fabric will be underneath this overflow. And I've done this fairly close together, hand's width, all the way along, because again these fabrics tend to slip over each other quite a lot. So hopefully I will straight stitch along, high enough to hold it on to the fabric and low enough so that I avoid the eyelet, all the way along, which will be a bit tricky because there's going to be a lot of fabric one side or the other going through my sewing machine. So take it slow and you should be fine. Straight stitch, same distance up. So here we are at the sewing machine. I've got the pink layer on one side and I've got the lining on the other side, and I've tried to roll it up to make it easier to pass through that small hole. In terms of stitch length, I've got the needle in the middle and I've pushed it up to 3mm instead of 2.5, simply because the stitches that were already on these curtains were quite big and it was much easier to unpick. And I don't think it's going to make any difference having smaller and easier, and it's easier for me to unpick at the end if there's a mistake. Right, so if you can see, I need my foot edge to be in line with this pink edge under here, and I can feel that the eyelet's here, so I've got to navigate between the eyelet and the edge. Right, let's see how we do. Going to make sure I stop with my needle in, if at all possible. Here I am, about halfway through. Don't be afraid that the fabric is fighting you. You are in control. This is your project. The curtains do not need to win. And I've got fabric rolled here, piled here. I've got bulges coming, you know. It's a lot of fabric, and don't worry if what you have to do is take out the pin, pull the fabric flat again, and then keep stitching. If we end up with slightly more at the other end, it's okay, we'll figure it out. But do try and stop with the needle in to stop it moving around too much when you're really fighting against it. You will get there, slow and steady. Here is the line that we've stitched all along, and what we're going to do, unfortunately my mum always used to tell me, iron, iron, iron. And as much as I hate to admit it, your sewing projects are always better when you iron them in between stitching. It just seems to make it neater and nicer, and yeah, I don't want to admit it, but I've resorted to that. I want a fairly cool iron because both of these fabrics are a little bit man-made. Whilst there is cotton in the lining, the outer is polycotton, and they've got extra stuff in that you don't want to iron too hot because it's just like plastic, it will melt. So what I'm trying to do is iron flat this line here so that when I lift it, it drops down nicely. And then what I'm going to do is get my pins, and I'm going to pin the side seam down like this all the way, holding the lining in, and then I'm going to top stitch it all the way down, always from the top to the bottom. So one way is going to be tricky because you're going to have lots and lots of fabric in the wrong side of the machine, but always top to bottom because we've already attached the top, and you top stitch it all the way down to secure it in place so that it looks like it's always been there. Right, so I'm back. I've pinned it all the way down so that the lining is tucked underneath so I can stitch along the top, and when I get to the bottom I have a slight problem. My hem's a nice length, see? Just above the bottom, but because I'm tipping the side in, I've got this flap that kind of doesn't want to go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep tucking under, and then to put a slight corner fold here and pin, so I stitch straight down and hold the fabric in, but it folds just at the right point so that it still hangs nicely on the edge. And then this one here, which I've also, because I've unpicked all the way around here, and I'm going to have to come down and then stitch across here just to make sure we hold it all, the corner back in place nicely after I did my unpicking. And so, and now this side is all ready to be stitched in the sewing machine. So here we are, we've got the lining in the middle here. I've just been ironing and going through and picking off any bits of thread just to make sure that all those edges are off. And I'm also ironing right down the edge here to make sure that this new edge that I've created lies nice and flat when I hang it up. Because the worst thing you want is to see it and have all the game given away by the fact that that edge is all puckered and hanging funny because you've not ironed it. But our lining is in, it's tucked underneath the edging, all nice and tidy, and it should make pretty good curtains. Get rid of all the creases and then I will be ready to hang them up and see just how blackout they really are, the big test. So, here we are, back in the little people's bedroom with 2 curtains. So I've skipped ahead and done the second one, with the lining inside, all nicely hidden inside, and ironed and ready to go up on the wall. Let's see how we do and how it looks. We can test the output. Be wary by adding this fabric, you do make your curtains heavier. So if you have an issue with your curtain fixings not being quite heavy duty enough, you might need to reinforce them. Right, shall we test? Let's see. How much light does it block out? Well, we've got another window over here, so that kind of confuses things. But I would say that is a lot more successful at keeping a little one asleep than it was before. Thanks for watching, and hopefully there'll be another video soon.